Welcome to the Truth and Liberty broadcast. We believe we have a mandate to bring godly change to our nation and the world through the 7 spheres or mountains of influence. To further this cause, we give away a product every week that will empower you to get involved in changing your life and changing our world. You can register for our weekly giveaway by subscribing at truthandliberty.net. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to receive weekly updates on guests, news, and much more. This is an interactive live cast, and we welcome your questions. To ask a question during the live cast, use the comment or chat features. Now get ready to dive into this week's topics with our hosts on location in Colorado, USA.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Truth and Liberty livecast. I'm Richard Harris, and with me tonight and my lovely co-host is Karen Conrad. And Karen is joining us tonight from her office in Dallas, Texas. And then we have as our very special guest tonight, Derrick Wilburn. Derrick is the head of the Rocky Mountain Black Conservatives. And so we are so honored to have you with us, Derrick. And Karen, it's always awesome to have you on the livecast.
Well, thank you, Richard. It's so great to be here.
Well, so we're going to give you an introduction here in just a minute, Derrick. That's appropriate, I hope. And Karen, for those of you who don't know, Karen Conrad was one of the original founders of the Truth and Liberty Coalition. I think we're getting really close to being 2 years in existence here. And Karen used to be my boss, and then she has pursued some other opportunities, but we bring her on as much as we possibly can, so we're really glad to have her tonight. And I think Karen's going to share some announcements with everybody about how you can interact with our live cast and possibly become eligible for a product that we have to give away tonight and some other great information. So Karen, I'll just turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Richard. Welcome, everybody, to the Truth and Liberty Coalition broadcast. It's always a great broadcast. And tonight we're really excited. It's been quite a week in news, hasn't it, Richard? My goodness, so much happening. And the Truth and Liberty is really created to be able to give you a filter of what's happening in the world through the Word of God. And we've got an awesome website, and I want to encourage you, if you are watching on social media, that's great. But if you want to make sure that you don't get preempted or cut off by Facebook, or if you want to be able to have access to all of the information and articles, watch it at truthandliberty.net/live. And as I was looking through the website, I just see we've got so many new things up on the website. Richard, you do such a great job with the team of keeping everybody up to date. So there's a couple things I'll just mention. One of them is we do have a 24-hour news feed. And so as news is happening, the Truth and Liberty website is updated. And I see that we've got the iVoter Guide up this week, Richard, right. And it rolls out by state. So I thought maybe it'd be helpful just to share for a couple of moments about the iVoter Guide and what people can expect.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it is an off year, 2019, but there are still some elections and some important elections going on, and our partners at iVoter Guide prepare Christian-based voter guides for you, and we make those available to you on our website. You can go to the link for iVoter Guide on truthandliberty.net. Click that and it'll take you to their website where you can put in your zip code and pull up the voter guide that's appropriate for your state. So they have recently rolled out voter guides for Virginia, Mississippi, and Louisiana. So if you live in those states, you can access your voter guides now. And as we get closer to election date, I'm sure they'll have more voter guides come out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. And also, we've got Trump's Ukraine call transcript up on the website. And I've not read that, Richard. I'm sure you've read it through, and we'll be able to visit about that a little bit tonight.
Yeah, it should be under the label. We probably should have labeled it Nothing Burger, But.
There you go. And then also, I see you've got the redacted whistleblower complaint that is on there. And then we always have good information from the Family Research Council. Richard has a blog. It's just excellent. So I want to encourage you to read that. And many other things are out there on that website. We also want to invite you to watch gospeltruth.tv. And it's really Andrew and Friends. It's a completely free network, 24/7. Anytime that we go live, like tonight, Truth and Liberty is aired on Gospel Truth TV along with a live Bible study. So if you are looking for some solid biblical teaching, go to gospeltruth.tv. Also, we've always got so many great events at Andrew Womack Ministries. And as we speak, we've got the Ministers Conference going on. And so we've got some great speakers. And Andrew has that conference every year just to bless and really pour into ministers. Women's Arise is coming November 7th through the 9th. And so you want to register for that. We've got Sue Sheriff and Dorothy Brown as guest speakers this year. And then that same weekend, we have got the premiere of Esther, Queen of Persia, which is an amazing musical production by Elizabeth and Robert Mirren. I'll tell you, it is Broadway style, but much, much better content.
Yeah.
And so if you want to register and attend that, you can go to awmi.net. Also, every week we have a giveaway. And so we have a product that we give away each week. And last week we had Christian Philosophy by Andrew, which is a great book and another one to pull out and share and read again as we enter another election. And we want to congratulate Warren Larkin. Congratulations, you are the winner. And I know Andrew signed that. We've got that coming out to you. And this week we are giving away God and Country, which is a CD by Andrew Womack. Thank you for that, Richard. It's a great teaching. And if you want to be eligible to win that, you can subscribe at truthandliberty.net, and you'll receive great updates, and you'll also be in that drawing every week. So again, to be eligible for the gift, register at truthandliberty.net/subscribe. One of the special things about the Truth and Liberty broadcast is that we like to interact with you. We like your questions, and we give you an opportunity to ask, and we answer as many as we can each week. And if we don't get to your question, Richard is always on Facebook every Tuesday, and he answers additional questions. But the way that you can post your question is if you're on Truth and Liberty or awmi.net, go ahead and post that question in the chat section. If you're on social media, you can enter it in the comment section. And we have got a whole team that is standing by to take that question. They forward it right to my computer here, and we'll take those questions at the end of the broadcast. Also, we want to let you know that if you need prayer, there is so much going on, and sometimes we need some clarity. Or if you want to learn more about the ministry or how to donate to Truth and Liberty, you can call 719-635-1111, or to support Truth and Liberty, which is a 501c4, and Richard will explain a little bit more about what that means. You can go to truthandliberty.net/give. So we are ready to really dive into a great Truth and Liberty broadcast tonight.
Thank you, Karen. That was excellent. Yes. So Truth and Liberty is a 501c4 now, which means that we are tax exempt, but your donations are not tax deductible, unfortunately. But nevertheless, if you give to Truth and Liberty, you can be assured that you are advancing the kingdom of God as we proclaim truth to the culture. So we appreciate so much your generosity and your donations there on truthandliberty.net/donate. So I want to get to our guest here tonight, Derrick Wilburn. How awesome to have him with us. Derrick, as I mentioned, is the executive director of Rocky Mountain Black Conservatives and the driving force behind POC Capital. Derrick is devoted to bridging the gap between conservative political causes and candidates and ethnic minorities. And Derrick, it is so great to have you with us tonight. Welcome, brother.
Thanks, Richard. It is absolutely my pleasure. I will come on anytime you ask. Just say the word.
All right. Well, we're really glad to have you. So tell us about Rocky Mountain Black Conservatives. What do you do? What's your mission and purpose? And what are some of your programs?
The mission is real simple. Well, I'll give you the background first. The background is we began in my backyard. Literally, this is a grassroots movement. Literally, we started on my grassroots. A handful of years ago, we had a Senate race here in Colorado. This is 2010. And I've been a fundamental conservative for 25 years. I mean, some things what does skin color have to do with it? But that's another discussion altogether. So
Right.
After Barack Obama's first 2 years in office, 2009, 2010, we conservatives were getting more and more frustrated. It reached the point where I couldn't even watch the TV, a press conference, because I'd have to buy a new TV because I'm throwing a brick or something like that. But finally, I said, sitting here getting angry isn't making a difference. I want to make a difference. So at that point in time, we had a race, a Senate race. Congressman Ken Buck, now Congressman Ken Buck, but at that point he was Attorney Ken Buck, was running for U.S. Senate as a Republican. And I called his campaign office one day and said, Republicans historically get a very small percent of the black vote. If you would like to come and explain to a group of black voters why you deserve our support, I'll host a meet and greet for you at my house. And he accepted. The pictures of this event are on the internet to this very day. We had about 40 or 50 people, friends of mine, family members, people from my church, what have you. And we had a real nice exchange between this Republican candidate and a very diverse community of voters. He ended up not winning that race, but we chipped a brick out of the wall. We sat down in a room, actually in my backyard, and had a cordial discussion about issues that matter. So I said, maybe we should do that again. And then I called our congressman, Congressman Doug Lamborn, and he came. And I thought maybe we should do that again. So I called our mayor, who was a Republican, and he came. And then we outgrew my backyard. I had to rent a facility. And next thing you know, I'd become a political activist on accident.
There you go.
So that's how the whole thing started.
That's great. You're just a citizen who's concerned and stepping into the fray, and now look at you. So your organization, Rocky Mountain Black Conservatives, you are invited to speak all over the country now. You appear on talk shows and television broadcasts, and I think you even have your own webcast and blog that you put out. Is that right?
Correct. I've done punditry work all over the country, radio gigs, that type of thing, speaking at Lincoln Day dinners, stuff like that. So I have my own channel on the Encounter Truth Network as well.
If people want to find you, want to listen to your podcast or whatever, how do they do that?
Doesn't get any easier. blackandconservative.com.
blackandconservative.com. Well, we've got rmblackconservatives.com. Is that the same one?
They'll go to the same place.
Okay, excellent. Well, that's awesome, Derrick. Well, so I know that people tonight are wondering about conservatism and Black Americans. It seems like those two things don't go together very often. And yet you find yourself as a Black American and a conservative. And how does that, why is that such a rarity among the Black community?
I fault the Republican Party. I fault the Democrat Party. So there's plenty of blame to go around. Long short is it's easy to get Paul's vote if you're going to pay Peter for it. So the Democrat Party came along, Lyndon Johnson, Great Society, Model Cities programs, all these things 50 years ago, and began essentially saying to the Black family, particularly the Black female, we, the government, will provide your need. We will provide you a place to live. We will give you food and diapers for your babies. We'll do all these things. You have it coming to you, and the government will provide it. And so that began the ball rolling where Blacks started supporting Democrats because free money is a good thing when you can get your hands on it. Unfortunately, there's always a hook. There's always a catch. And that catch came back to bite us now 50 years later, where we're seeing 73% out of wedlock birth rate and some of the other things that we're seeing. The Democrats are the ones that built those concrete jungles, housing projects in our inner cities and said to all the Black people, you all can live over there. But the price was right. On the other hand, the Republican Party has essentially let the vote go. The outreach efforts and inclusion efforts have been pathetic, to say the least. You don't reach the point where 95% of a voter bloc is voting against you and think that you're doing an effective job of reaching those voters. So the problem for we Black Americans is we're now stuck in the middle. So now you have one political party with no incentive to court our vote, none whatsoever. We're going to get 90% regardless. We have another political party that also has no incentive to court our vote. What's the point of investing resources to go from 4% to 5%? It's just not worth it. So as a result, we as a voter bloc are going with the devil that we know rather than the devil that we don't know, just because there's familiarity.
Yeah, and you're saying that both parties, well, the Democrats take you for granted, and the Republicans think you're a lost cause. So neither one really speaks to you and addresses your issues, I guess.
That's it. Well, the Democrats do speak and address our issues and more effectively, although I would argue that the way in which they address our issues is counterproductive. At least they talk. So, I was born in inner city Chicago. And when you go down into inner city black neighborhoods in this country, Chicago, New Orleans, Atlanta, it doesn't matter. Everyone says the same thing on this topic. My aunts, my uncles, my grandma, they all say the same thing. Republican, I've never seen one.
Oh, wow.
I've been living in this neighborhood for 25 years. I've never seen one.
Wow.
That's the Republicans' fault.
That's something. Historically, of course, the black Americans used to be almost entirely Republican because it was Lincoln that freed the slaves. And it wasn't until, like you mentioned, the 1960s and Lyndon Johnson's Great Society and the Civil Rights Act where blacks began to switch over to the Democratic Party.
Correct.
So were you a Democrat at first and then became a Republican?
Correct.
And how did that process work for you? That kind of awareness.
No, that's easy. My girlfriend, who is now my wife of 25 years, she was a born-again believer when we met. I was not. I'd been raised in the church, and mom and dad dragged me to mass every Sunday and all that stuff like everybody else. But I didn't have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I didn't study the Bible. I didn't know any of that stuff. My wife led me to a personal relationship with Christ, a conversion experience. And then over the course of the next handful of years, I began to realize that the things I'm professing to believe on Sunday and the things that I'm voting for on Tuesday do not agree. Something has to change. And since the Bible made it clear that in him there is no change, the change had to be me. So that's when I made the conversion and started drifting toward a more Republican path in my life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That does make sense. Derrick, that's really interesting because if we do vote along the lines of the Bible, abortion, all this transgender, homosexuality, all these social issues are clearly against what the Word of God says. So how do we get the word out to voting Christians that are voting Democrat to help them to understand how to connect these, like you kind of had that revelation of?
And it's not just the social issues, it's the fiscal issues too. The principles of the Bible and fiscal economic matters. The Democrat Party has gone so far away from those, especially when you take a look at a Bernie Sanders, this type of person,
Yes.
that Jesus, I would say, would be rolling over in his grave, except he isn't in one. The banner behind me, which I don't know if it makes it onto your screen or not, I don't think it does, but it says our company's slogan, which is truth transcends color. The truth transcends color, all color. The Bible doesn't, color is irrelevant. So here's how I frame it. I'm concerned with truth. That's the only thing that matters is the truth. So if the world's biggest racist, whoever that even is, I don't know, the current head of the KKK or David Duke or whatever, if they come on this show, you invite them on this show next week, and during this hour-long segment, they say the following: 5 + 5 = 10. Is that somehow not true just because it was said by a racist? I don't care about color. I don't care about anything other than the truth. And anyone who professes Christ as Savior and who knows the Scripture and the Word but turns their back on its truth in favor for what is said by men is making a bed that they aren't going to want to sleep in.
That's a great point. Well, it seems like that there's a lot of what people call identity politics in America now, where people are voting based on maybe outward conditions or what group they belong to, what minority, or whether they're male or female or gay or whatever. If I hear what you're saying, Derrick, it sounds like you're saying, what matters is what does the Word of God say? And that as Christians, whether you're black, white, Latino, or Asian, it doesn't matter. You need to be voting according to those convictions. How do you get that word out to Christians who are of minorities in America? What are you doing on that cause?
Here's how I frame it. That's an excellent question. And you can't, in a limited forum, which most people, you have a very limited forum, unless you live with them, you've got a half hour to an hour, something like that. These aren't people you can communicate with and get deep into the issues of the day. The way that we have to address these things and the way that I address these things is very simple. The idea of a large governing central body, in our case, located in Washington, D.C., being able to address local issues is how we've gotten into the position we're in today. The closer to where the money is earned, that the money is spent, the better decisions tend to get made, right? So we need to empower states, counties, and cities and communities to govern themselves and get away from Washington, D.C., which is so corruptible by the spirit of Jezebel and of everything else that they've got going on out there. Mm-hmm. If somebody really wants to find out how do we get our country back, whatever that means to you, I mean, maybe you're very, very liberal and you think we've gone too conservative. You are not going to get there by sending your tax dollars to people 1,800 miles away to make decisions for you and then are going to spend it and send it back to your community. We have to decentralize the governing power and move that power back to the states. And we do that, in my opinion, most effectively by electing and sending conservative legislators to Washington, D.C., who understand the central government's role needs to be very limited and the power of the community needs to be enhanced. Mm.
You know, if we look at the last two presidencies, you take Barack Obama, and now, of course, Trump is just 2/3 through his first term, but Obama was in office for 8 years, and, you know, he was the first black president, so to speak, and yet the economic indicators, the condition of the average black family in America didn't improve. In fact, by some markers, it got worse economically, and yet Trump's been in office only 2.5 years now, and they say that he's a racist, and yet black unemployment is now at a record low, the lowest on record. Hispanic unemployment is the lowest on record. Even regular unemployment is at historic lows. So, do these facts do they matter to the black community? Is the word not getting to them, or what impact is this situation having, do you think, politically?
Trump is the worst racist ever. So you said by some measures, that's not true. By all measures, I'm an economist. I have a degree in economics. I follow this stuff very carefully. At the end of Barack Obama's tenure, at the end of his 8 years, all key federally measured economic statistics for black Americans were down or up, depending on which is bad. They moved in the wrong direction. Household income, household indebtedness, unemployment, the numbers on welfare, numbers living at or beneath the federally defined poverty line. They were all worse. Now they are all better. So the answer to your question is yes and no. So the Democrats are playing the one card they have, and that is racism, white supremacy, all that other nonsense. Because it's really all they've got. They can't talk about the job Trump is doing as it relates to black America because he's doing a pretty good job. So they're going with all they've got. The problem, in my opinion, is the Republican Party's failure to seize upon this moment and opportunity. They want to fight amongst themselves and protect their own little turf. But here's the answer to your question about how it's going to play out in the ballot box. I believe you're going to have the largest black shadow vote for Trump that you've ever seen. So there are a lot of people who voted for Trump, a lot of blacks who voted for Trump in 2016, but they wouldn't admit it.
Yeah.
They wouldn't tell a pollster or an exit pollster, and they certainly wouldn't tell mom, dad, or Uncle Jim, but they voted for him. And people tend to vote their self-interest. People tend to vote their bank account. And now, more people have more money. More people are finding jobs. We have 5 million more jobs available in this country than people to fill them. So you don't have to convince people Trump's doing a good job. They can see. Last year, I made $38,000. This year, I'm making $42,000. And I think you're going to see a lot of blacks vote for Trump, but they will not tell anybody about it. They'll do it like this.
Yeah, so I've talked to some conservative black friends of mine, and they've all pretty much universally relayed to me the difficulty that they've experienced by letting their friends and family know that they're Republican or that they're conservative. Have you experienced that in your life, Derrick?
Oh, of course, yeah. I knew there'd be enemy fire when I signed up for duty. That's inevitable, and I tell you what, though, it's playing out in a very interesting way. Satan always overplays his hand.
Yeah, he does.
Always. And I would not equate the Democrats with Satan. I don't think that rhetoric helps anything, nor do I think it's true. But they've overplayed their hand, and they're going to keep overplaying their hand. So you've got a bunch of people who are constantly screaming racism, constantly screaming white supremacy, constantly trying to tie Trump to all that stuff. Meanwhile, their own camp is out beating people up in the streets. Hosing people down with pepper spray, showing up wearing masks and attacking people, literally hospitalizing them and attacking police officers and getting into fisticuffs in the street. So people who are sitting back, not necessarily thoroughly engaged, as you and I may be, but they can look and see, where's the hate really coming from here? Is it the conservatives who are showing up in disadvantaged communities and helping clean up the streets, and who are going to third world nations and digging wells so people they've never even seen have clean drinking water? Are they the ones filled with hate, or is it them? And I think it's all going to backfire and blow up in their faces.
I agree with you. There's some quasi-celebrity figures out there now who are blacks, like Candace Owens and Diamond and Silk, who kind of came on the social media scene during the 2016 election, and Kanye West, who caught a lot of flack for going to the Oval Office and visiting with Trump. And so I think a lot of people are wondering, well, is this just a few outliers, or is there actually a shift taking place in the mindset of black voters in America? And it sounds like you're saying that there is a shift underway. I guess time will tell how large of a shift and whether that's lasting or not.
It is, and a lot of that's going to be dependent upon the Republican Party, and whether or not they pick up the mantle and run with it. Kanye, did you see the news on him over the weekend? He announced over the weekend that he has finished making secular music.
Yeah.
He is only going to do gospel recording from here on out.
Wow. That's incredible.
So, there is movement. The key is for the Republicans. And again, and I don't want to say Republican equals conservative, because that's not true. Not all conservatives are Republicans. A lot of them are registered constitutionalist party or what have you. And certainly not all Republicans are conservatives. But for the sake of conversation, let's just assume that's true. If the Republican Party will pick up the mantle and run with it, there's a faction of the Republican Party that hates Donald Trump, and we all know that. But Trump is an interesting character in that he's not beholden to anybody. He doesn't need the job. He doesn't need the paycheck. He donates his paycheck. He's got $3 billion. What's he need $400,000 a year for? So he's an interesting character in that he'll say whatever he thinks, and he really doesn't care who doesn't like it. And the black community tends to like that. And I think that's resonating. If the Republican Party would pick that up and run with it, they'd pick up 5 or 6 points overnight.
Wow. That's that'd be amazing, wouldn't it? Well, one of the things that's interesting is the black church, Derrick. I'd like to get your perspective on that. And I know that's not a monolithic thing. I say it as if it is, but black pastors and ministers, it seems like most of them, predominantly, at least over the last 50, 60 years, have been Democrats. And that the Democratic Party goes into black churches and they court that vote and so forth. All the while, when the Democratic Party is moving further and further away from God's standards on life, on freedom, on free enterprise, on the family, on gender. What's happening among black ministers, if you know? Is this an issue for them, and how are they? How's it being discussed, and how are they dealing with it?
Well, there's no them. So it's a question that gets asked frequently. And in a forum like this, we have to kind of talk about people as a block of people, right? But in fact, people are individuals. Now, there is a significant block of the black clergy who are marching right along with the Democrat Party, a significant block. And part of it is they hate Trump. And let's face it, I mean, Trump doesn't always make it easy. Being a supporter of Trump is not always an easy thing to be. But I think that's a part of his appeal. However, what you oftentimes see, particularly in urban black communities, the elected representatives, city, county, state, federal, and the clergy tend to have new BMWs and Cadillacs, while everybody else has 28-year-old Fords and Chevrolets. So there's a gravy train that someone's riding somewhere. And getting off of that gravy train is a tough thing to do. It's very difficult to take away what somebody's already been given. You see the exact same situation in urban schools, where the unionization, the union members, the union bosses, they're getting very well paid. They've negotiated contracts where the teachers and administrators are getting very well paid. So they're not going to not go with the Democrats because they got a house payment they have to keep up. Same with a lot of clergy. So they're on board with the Democrats all the way to the end of the line. But what a lot of these people have done is they've said to the Democrat Party, you can ride in the front seat with me and put the gospel in the back seat and let Jesus ride back there. And they may not see the folly of their ways in this life, but ultimately we know who's going to get the final say.
What do you think needs to happen? What should the average American, what can the average American do in his or her own life, in his or her own church or community to help bridge the racial divide in this country? Do you have any thoughts about that?
I do. And here's what we can do. I want to be real specific. Sadly, the most segregated hour of the week in the United States of America is 10 o'clock Sunday morning. And we all know that. Generally speaking, most of the people in your church look like you, no matter who you are. Generally speaking, if the pastor's white, the congregation's white. The pastor's Asian, the congregation's Asian. That's just kind of how it is. We don't live that way Monday through Saturday. But then on Sunday, we run to our little safe havens, and that's just kind of how things go. I've recommended this to many pastors, and some have taken me up on it. Oftentimes you'll have a city that has what they call a sister city, right? So here in Colorado Springs, I think our sister city is in Mexico, if I remember correctly. And we do some cross-pollination stuff. They've sent us things that we put into one of those time capsules that gets buried, and then they're going to dig it up in 100 years, and all this type of stuff. Why not do the same thing with a church? So if you have a church that is a predominantly Caucasian body, and you're in a city where there is an ethnic minority population. Now, granted, some people might be in cities of 2,000 people, and everybody there is white. There's nothing you can do about it. But if you're in a city like Colorado Springs or Denver, like we are, why not find a pastor of a black church and you, the pastor of a white church, and say, you know what, let's become sister churches. Let's tear down this wall of separation. We can put politics aside. We don't have to agree on everything politically. In fact, maybe we shouldn't agree on everything politically. But we need to agree on this. We serve a sovereign God. And let's become sister churches and communicate to our congregation the following. We have become sister churches with First Presbyterian or with United Baptist or whatever over on 33rd Street. Are you, Mr. or Mrs. White congregant or Mr. or Mrs. Black congregant, are you willing to commit to attending services at our sister church one Sunday a month or one Sunday a quarter or whatever? Go over there and worship with those brothers and sisters and begin to develop relationships and face and name recognition with people who don't look like you. And let's start weaving these churches together. And over the course of 4, 5, 6, 10, 15 years, pretty soon your kids and my kids have grown up knowing each other. And we begin to tear that wall down.
Well, that's a great idea.
Great idea. Do you know, Derrick, if you were to give conservative politicians, maybe Republicans in this election coming up, some advice on how to most effectively reach the Black community with these things that we talked about, what are a couple things that you would suggest?
I just gave you one. So, Mr. or Mrs. Elected Representative, visit the predominantly ethnic minority churches in your district on a regular basis. Pull out a map, pull out a calendar, find out where those congregations are, and make a commitment that 3 times this year or whatever, I'm going to go to that church and I'm going to worship with those people and get to know them personally. Number one. Number two, do the same thing with the clergy. Find out who the Black pastors in your district are, if you have any, and take those individuals to lunch once a quarter or breakfast or whatever. Get to know them as individuals first, as voters second. Attend all of the ethnic minority festivals and carnivals and things like that that take place in your district. So here in Colorado, I'm in Colorado Springs, which is, it's not close enough to Denver to be considered a twin city, but it's not far. It's like an hour up the road. We have Martin Luther King Day celebrations. We have Denver, the largest ethnic minority festival event in our state is the Cinco de Mayo Festival in Denver every year. Chinese New Year. These things are huge. So you have large numbers of ethnic minorities who come out to celebrate cultural events that are important in their culture. The Denver Martin Luther King Day Parade, there's a march every year on MLK Day right down Colfax Avenue that ends in a festival in front of our Capitol building. Estimates are 20 to 30,000 people participate in that march. I've marched in it 9 years in a row. Mr. or Mrs. Elected Official, 30,000 of your constituents are in one place at one time. Why on earth would you ever not be there? Get out there, develop face and name recognition first, fish for votes second. Republicans historically have done it the other way around, and that's one of the problems.
Wow, that's great advice. Well, we're going to have to get to some questions here in just a minute, but I wanted to give you one more, just a current events question, and that's just, what do you think about the whole impeachment thing that's broken over the last few days? What do you make of it, Derrick?
Impeachment mania. I think that the representative from Georgia said it best. If we don't impeach him, he's going to win. Unfortunately, we now have people who are using the process of impeachment as a voter manipulation mechanism. So they can see, the bigger picture, in my opinion, is that the top of the Democrat Party has drifted so far left that they are now unelectable. Find me a Democrat anywhere in the country who is in favor of lowering the taxation levels on their constituents. Find just one. They all want to raise taxes. They've made it perfectly clear. Find just one who thinks we should extend some form of rights, legal protection to the unborn. Find me just one. So they've gone so far left that they're unelectable. So those in the positions of power who understand what I just said is true are scratching their heads saying, we got to keep this guy from getting 4 more years somehow. Impeach.
Yeah.
And so we're getting Russiagate, Hookergate, UK, anything they can find to impeach. But they don't have the numbers. They're never going to get the numbers. He isn't going to be impeached. And even if he is, impeachment doesn't mean removal from office.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton was impeached, but served out the duration of his term. So they're chasing their tails. And here's how I'll end it. The American people handed control of the House of Representatives, which of course introduces articles of impeachment, in the last year, in the November elections, and the current crop of legislators was sworn into office in January of this year. Since January, whatever that is, 8 months ago, what has the Democrat Party that now controls the House of Representatives accomplished on behalf of the American people? Have they tackled health care reform? Have they done a single thing other than impeach, impeach, impeach? It is fool's gold, and I think they're going to pay a terrible price for it.
Well, I personally hope they do. I think they know there's no chance of him being actually convicted in the Senate. So the way it works is the House will vote to impeach. That takes a majority vote. Then it goes to the U.S. Senate, where they have to have a 2/3 vote of conviction to actually remove the president from office. And since the Republicans hold the Senate, that's almost an impossibility. Absolutely, certainly an impossibility based on what we see right now with this whole silly Ukraine thing.
But I'll tell you the more important number, Richard. The Republicans obviously have the numbers in the Senate, but the numbers that people need to look at are the so-called blue dog Democrats in the House. So the number of representatives in the House who represent districts that Trump won in 2016, those are the nervous people. Because if Pelosi and the rest of this crew shove this through and bring it to a vote, their phones are going to ring off the hook.
Yeah.
From people who voted for Trump in 2016 saying, if you vote to impeach this man, you can write me off. I'm done.
Yep.
I'm not only not voting for you, I'm not sending in that $50 check I sent last time.
There you go. Well, I suspect that we've got some questions coming in from our viewers. So why don't we shift gears here and Karen, you wanna pose any of those questions to Derrick?
Yes, absolutely. We've got a lot of questions coming in, a lot of interest from our audience tonight. So I'll start with this first one. It's from Lewis on chat. And this is a question for you, Derrick. He says, as you travel around the nation, can you assess just how well the church is prepared versus other grassroots movements to shift the needle away from lawlessness to a morality envisioned by America's founders?
I can only comment, of course, upon what I've seen, and what I've seen, frankly, I'm not encouraged by. The number of churches who are following in the footsteps of people like Andrew Womack, who have taken a stand and said, you know what, we need to get involved. At the governmental level, we, the church, being silent is what's driving our nation away from our godly foundations and principles. The number of people willing to do that from the pulpit is sadly pathetic, in my opinion, because I think everybody should be doing that from the pulpit. If we, the church, advocate that responsibility, who does that leave? The reprobates and the unsaved who don't know the gospel and govern as a result of the will of men. So I am discouraged by what I see coming forth from the pulpits in the country, but Andrew would be a better person to answer that than me.
Yeah, we did have a rally. You were at our rally on September 14th here in Woodland Park, Colorado, and I was really encouraged by that here locally. It struck me that we had a good turnout, and 1,200 people watching online, 800 people in person in little old Woodland Park, Colorado. And I think there's a leadership vacuum, Derrick, don't you? I mean, we need pastors and Christian leaders to stand up and fill that void, because I think the rank and file believers out there are ready and willing. They just need some leadership.
They're hungry for truth.
Yeah.
They're hungry for truth. And now that for the last 8 years, well, for the 8 years of the Obama administration, of course, we had the scepter of the IRS hanging over the head of every pulpit in the country, right? You say one thing that we don't like, and we're going to squash you like a bug by auditing you and putting you through all sorts of turmoil and potentially shutting your church down. That's gone now with the Trump IRS, but still, I think a lot of that mentality is still there.
Yeah.
And you've got a lot of pastors who just don't want to touch it. We do have a good remnant here where we live in Colorado Springs, and I suspect some other pockets around the country like Tulsa, where you've got a big evangelical vocal base. But if you get out into the cities around the country, and certainly places like Seattle and San Francisco, those people are hiding underneath the sheets rather than open their mouth.
Yeah. We've certainly got some work to do. Karen, you got any more questions for us?
Yes. This one came in on chat, and it says, Derrick, in your opinion, what will Barack Obama's legacy be?
It depends upon who writes it. So the ones who write the legacies, the histories, are not particularly favorable toward conservatives. So if you go to the MLK Memorial, the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial in Washington, D.C., I did a press conference there a couple of years ago, you would have no idea that Dr. King was a preacher. None. It doesn't mention it anywhere. To read the plaques in that memorial, you would think that he is a gun control advocating leftist. Those were his priorities. So as Obama is going to go down, I believe, very favorably by those who believe in who he was. Now, his legislative legacy is lousy. Barack Obama created more millionaires and billionaires in his 8 years than our country did in the previous 40, and everything else went to hell in a handbasket economically. So he did not do a particularly good job of managing our economy. But for the woke crowd, he did a great job of introducing LGBTQ into everything. He did a great job of opening our nation to the beliefs of diverse faiths. He did a great job for all those things that those on the left wing think are a high priority. And those tend to be the same people that lionize and canonize those people into our history books.
Wow, great. Thank you for that. This is Ruthie on chat who says, what opposition did you face when you walked away from the Democratic Party? And how do you get others to walk away from the Liberal Party, knowing what's ahead of them?
The opposition I faced was mostly family. My immediate family and I are fine. I've got a small family. I only have one sister, and both my parents are still alive, and they're all born again believers. Some extended family members, cousins and aunts and uncles and people like that lost some of those relationships. But the way I see it, how much did I really lose? Right? If they're willing to break relationship with me over how I choose to vote, how strong was our friendship in the first place? In terms of convincing other people, I go back to my comments of about 30 minutes ago. The truth transcends color. You cannot win a debate with somebody on emotion. So you can't argue with someone, you can't debate with someone from the standpoint of emotion. You can only argue and debate facts. Your emotions can't be wrong. That's impossible. The way you feel is the way that you feel. But if you're telling me that 5 + 5 does not equal 10, now we're going to get it on. So if somebody wants to, I've had people tell me the reason the economy is booming today is because of Obama. They say it all the time. Okay, so what you're saying is the policies that Barack Obama championed during his 8 years in office didn't work. They just took 3 years after him leaving office to finally kick in. That doesn't even make any sense. So let's talk to people about what I call a formula I call for reals. Facts, reason, evidence, logic, statistics. That's where I live. Facts, reason, evidence, logic, statistics, because I cannot debate you on your emotion.
Very good, Derrick. Okay, we've got another question coming in. This is from Guest in the Wild on chat and says, what role do you think that the federal government should actually have in the United States? Meaning, are we overstepping? Because there seems to be a difference between the way President Trump approaches things and, let's say, a Bernie Sanders or some of the Democratic candidates.
The federal government role, of course, needs to be extremely limited. Now, I'm not an anarchist. We do need a central governing figure. There's no question about that. We need somebody to keep our skies safe. I think we all feel better knowing that when you fly in a commercial jet over Nebraska, that jet is being controlled and monitored and all that stuff by the same people that are going to be doing it once you cross the line and now you're over Kansas, right? So we need a federal government to do that. We need a federal government to maintain our monetary system. You don't want to get to the border of Texas, have to turn in your money, and then get your Oklahoma money, and then 6 hours later, once you're across Oklahoma, turn that money in and get your Missouri money. So the federal government does have a role to play. However, the mistake that we've got, and certainly the people like Bernie Sanders, is the notion of believing that a central governing figure can do an effective job of managing a nation of 330 million people. It's simply not possible. So yeah, there are major functions, national security, the FAA. There are some things the federal government should and must do, but we would not be $22 trillion in the hole if the government were only doing what it's supposed to do. The government is in and of itself inefficient. If I want to give your ministry $1, you get $1. If I give $1 to the government to give to your ministry, you're lucky to get 15 cents. What happens to the other 85 cents? Poof. No one knows. It disappears into some government stratosphere. So yes, we need a federal government, but it is much, much, much too large, inefficient, and corrupt. And breaking that up is one of the reasons that they hate Trump.
Wow, Derrick, that's really a great answer. Thank you. Switching gears here a little bit, we've got a question coming in on chat that says, what or how would you respond to those who believe whites would never understand because of white privilege?
You know, I'm a believer in privilege. I just don't put white in front of it. A lot of people have privilege. I have privilege. I was raised in a family with a mother and a father who stayed together through my childhood and into adulthood. That gave me privilege that millions of people of all stripes and all colors never had. So the whole white supremacy racism thing, first of all, I already told you, I don't care about racism. I care about truth. I don't care about color. I care about truth. Racism doesn't affect me because I don't let it affect me. But there has never been a more overrated concept than racism in America today. So today in America, racism would largely be dead if it weren't for the left keeping it on life support, using it for votes. Racism doesn't affect me. The KKK and white supremacists, who are these people? The KKK, by its own website, by its own self-admitted numbers, is somewhere between 7,000 and 10,000 person membership. That's it. You don't have enough people in the KKK to fill up an auditorium at a small university community college. You're talking 10,000 people in a nation of 330 million. Never before has a smaller, more insignificant group of people been given credit for doing everything when in fact they're doing nothing. The KKK hasn't burned a cross in anyone's yard, hasn't held a rally, hasn't done a thing in 50 years. Yet they still want to talk about them as if they're some sort of a political or geopolitical force in this country. Where are these people? White supremacists. So I don't even play that game with people. If people want to, if you are a racist, that doesn't affect me. It affects you. It poisons your soul. It is eating away at your spirit, not mine. As long as you do nothing to harm me, my family, or my property, I don't care if you're a racist. Be a racist. Doesn't affect me one bit.
Wow, Derrick, that is really a powerful answer.
Yeah.
I don't care.
I was reading in the news this last week, and there was an article that said that Tom Brady is popular because of white privilege. And I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
The 6 or 7 Super Bowl rings aren't why he's popular. It's white privilege.
Yeah. Why was Michael Jordan popular then? That makes no sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's where that comes from. In life, we tend to find that which we seek.
Right.
So if you invest your time into looking for racism, looking for privilege, looking for white supremacy, if that's the purpose of your endeavor, guess what you're going to find? Whereas if you tend to look for the best in people, you look for good, you look for light, you look for blessing, guess what you're going to find? So these people like Maxine Waters, they see racism everywhere because they look for racism everywhere.
Yeah, you see what you expect to see, right?
Bingo.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's excellent. A question came in from chat. What is the biggest issue facing Black Americans today?
The biggest issue is education. So when we have situations in schools in America today where kids are being pushed to the next grade that are not at grade proficiency level, where kids are graduating high school, unable to do fundamental mathematics, speaking something that resembles English in some ways, but they are ill-prepared for life in the real world. But because the money follows the kid, so by pushing this kid from the 6th grade to the 7th, we get money from the Department of Ed. It's happening anyway. So the biggest issue is that we are now putting people out into the world to fend for themselves, to get a job, begin a career, ultimately start a family, buy a home, do all that American dream stuff, who are not equipped to do it because their education level stopped at essentially the 6th or 7th grade, even though they're now 20 years old. That's the biggest challenge for the Black community right now.
Wow, that's a great answer. You know, Derrick, I think that a voucher program enabling inner city kids to go to private schools would be the greatest civil rights achievement in the last 50 years. What say you? This
is a talking point that is I hammer all the time. There is no such thing as a situation in which competition does not benefit the consumer. Yeah. Competition always benefits the consumer, including education. In fact, you could blow that up to the macro level and say that's the problem we Black Americans have in general, is we've said to one political party, you have no competition for our votes. It isn't so much that Democrat policies are bad or wrong, although I certainly would argue many of them are. That's not the point. Whenever you tell a group of people, we're voting for you, every time, we will never not vote for you. There's nothing you can do to stop us from voting for you. You're going to get the kind of results that we see in inner city Chicago today. And that's the same with the education system. Get some voucher systems in there. Enable mom and or dad to say, you know what, your school stinks, and I'm sending my kid over there. And now that Department of Ed money doesn't go to your school, but goes to that school, guess what happens to school number one? It starts improving.
Wow, that's very good. Great. Do we have time for one more question?
I think we can squeeze in one more. We've got about 2 minutes left.
Okay, and this is probably for both of you, and it's from guest 2085 on chat. And this is a great question. It's, what are the checks and balances on the House for people like Adam Schiff and others who are making things up that are obviously lies? How can they be held accountable, and can the courts get involved with this?
Well, I'll jump in on this one. You know, there are, each chamber of the Congress has rules and rules of ethics. And those rules prohibit members from knowingly lying or presenting false information. The problem that you have with Adam Schiff is that his party's in control, and that they're not going to censure him is what the remedy would be, unless it's just a really egregious thing. You might remember that with the, what's her name, the representative from Minneapolis, the Muslim woman, she said some anti-Semitic things a few months ago, and they were going to censure her, the House was, and they drafted the censure resolution, but by the time all of the party leaders got done with it, it was so watered down that there wasn't anything left to it. So that's the problem what we have. But you know, we're a republic, and the people hold the power, and it's up to the people to censure those leaders and to take that guy out of office. So the Republican Party or whoever need to put forward a solid candidate against Adam Schiff and see if we can get him out of office. So we've got 57 seconds left, and I just want to thank everybody tonight for watching the Truth and Liberty livecast. I hope that it was a blessing. Thank you, Karen, for helping host. You did so wonderful. And Derrick, what a great job, man. I really enjoyed tonight. We could have gone on for another couple hours, I think, but yeah, it's
fun too.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. So to our viewers, watch us again next week on truthandliberty.net at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, 8 p.m. Central. And check out our resources on our website, those voter guides and the other materials that we have available. In addition, the great events that we have coming up here at Andrew Womack Ministries, you're sure to be blessed. So once again, thank you for watching tonight, and we really appreciate you being with us. So God bless you, and we'll see you next week.
Page?
What's that?
Do we have time for me to plug my Facebook page?
Oh, we're out of time now. Sorry about that.
Next time.
Yep.
Join us next time for the Truth and Liberty broadcast. Find tonight's episode and related articles and links at truthandliberty.net. Truth and Liberty is viewer supported. If you'd like to help us continue our live casts, you can make a donation at truthandliberty.net or by calling our phone center at 719-635-1111. Our prayer ministers are there to help you with your donations and to pray with you.